Hello again, friends. Well, the railroad's been about 4 years since it got finished, so been operating for that time. I thought it was time to share some thoughts about how well the track plan has worked out. I think overall it's been successful. I mean, it gave a railroad with a purpose. You could detect what its purpose was, and realistic operation I think is possible. We got log cars going back and forth between the sawmill and the log camp. And we got some cars coming to and from a couple of non-logging industries on the railroad by way of an interchange track. So operations-wise, the basics are there, I think. Can operate realistically. But I do have some thoughts and maybe lessons learned to share about how the track plans worked out. The devil's in the details. So I'll show you some of those. One thing I've missed on the track plan is much in the way of storage tracks. Operating what I got works okay, but there's not much in the way of trackage to store a train of cars, for example. I've got a kind of a slick little set of work cars from Sierra West. You can see a few of them right here. There's about a dozen of them. And I'd like to have a track on the railroad where I could just put them out and have them on display. But it didn't really work out that way. Space is limited and there's always trade-offs. So for the time being, what I've done, I've got 5 or 6 of the cars right here where you can see them. And they're on one of the tracks leading out of the engine house up at the log camp. And since I don't currently have a locomotive in that particular stall of the engine house, I can get away with parking cars in front of it. So I can do that. And also another couple of those cars are kind of kept on the end of sidings. You can see one here and one over here in front of the brewery. And there's a couple of more scattered around the layout, a very small tank car and a very small box car. And finally, out behind the engine house at the sawmill area, there's another couple of cars here from that group. You almost can't see them, but one of them is right here. You can just see part of it maybe. And a little tiny car with just one truck here at the back. But so the cars are scattered around, and there really didn't turn out to be a good place to display a string of cars like that. I wish I could have had a better way to do it, but with space limitations, I just don't think it would have fit in. Would have been too hard to fit it in. So I live with it. So there's one thing on the track plan of note. And one more subject that became real important when planning a switchback railroad, as I have here, is train length. Of course, your train length is limited to how long your switchback tail tracks are. I planned the railroad basically to hold a locomotive, 3 log cars, and a caboose. You see such a train right here. And the locomotive is right up against the end of the tail track on the right end. And at the left end, the points of the switchback turnout are right here. So you just might be able to fit one more car in there. And certainly you could put 4 log cars there without a caboose. But from a planning perspective, train length is really critical for switchbacks because you're obviously limited by the tail tracks. So I've got 2 switchbacks, 2 tail tracks. They're both sized about the same. And the other thing is runaround tracks. At each end of the line, there's a runaround track. And of course, you have to accommodate that same train length at the runaround tracks. So that part's all worked out okay. But what I didn't count on was a couple of other limitations that really deal with some tracks kind of around the runaround track and how they interplay with each other. I'll show you that in a second. And up at the upper switchback, just to show the spacing we have available here, The locomotive, which you have to look at through the trees there a little bit, is sitting right at the points of the switchback turnout. And if we look around to the back of the train, you can see the tail end of the caboose right over here, and maybe 6 inches of space behind it before the track ends. And so without the caboose, again, a fourth log car would probably fit there, but 4 cars and a caboose probably would not. So those are the 2 switchback tail tracks. So the next little gotcha that I've sort of run across has to do with parking the log cars here at the log dump at the sawmill. You can see 3 cars parked there on the log dump siding, and the rear car is just within a couple of inches of the end of the track. And if we pan over to the right a little bit, see this turnout right here is the end of the runaround track, which works fine. And it's also the end of a crossover that goes between these 2 lines here and here that kind of run through this industrial area. And that crossover is the way that traffic gets between the interchange track here and the logging industries you see in the background there. So this particular turnout is a real important one. If you can't bring the interchange traffic through there, they'd have to go all the way around the long runaround track to get over to the industrial area or back again. And the catch is that the space between this log car right here and that turnout just barely accommodates 1 locomotive and 1 car. So if I had a log train of 4 cars, I would not be able to bring interchange traffic through that turnout. So that's a little bit of a gotcha right there. And to illustrate that point, here we see a locomotive that's just shy of the points on that turnout. And it's got 1 car with it, and it's within about maybe a ½ inch of coupling to that log car. So 1 locomotive and 1 car coming from the interchange through that turnout is it. Of course, if I really wanted to have a 4th log car, I could put it in there and manage to do all the interchange work while the dump track was empty. Very possible, but so far that's not been my routine. But this limitation is one I didn't really think about when I was laying out the track plan. So I guess that's the lesson learned here. Really think about every kind of movement on the railroad to make sure it's going to work with your track plan. Okay, we're up at the log camp now. And I apologize if the video is a little shaky, but my tripod won't really give the view I want here. So we're looking at a train of empty log cars that are just sitting on the arrival track, which is part of the runaround arrangement. At the right end here, you see we're just shy of the turnout. That's the runaround turnout. And there's 3 cars, and the other end of the runaround is way off in the distance. But I call your attention to that turnout that leads off to the right, where the loaded log cars are. So the little unexpected result I got here is that those 3 cars are really pushing the limits of the clearance on that turnout. And if I tried to make a 4-car train, the 4th car would definitely block the turnout leading to the log loading track. That is the one on the right. So that's a little unexpected result also from the way the track plan is worked out. So if I wanted to have a 4-car train again, I'd have to make some changes to how I handle the switching here in the log camp. Anyway, just one little consideration here, a constraint that turned out when I got into operation. So what does it all mean? Well, no great messages here, but I think I've learned through my experiences that If you're in the track designing phase, you're designing a track plan, it's pretty important to very, very thoroughly check out all the moves that you plan to make on the layout. As I've shown you, a couple of moves that I've involved with in operations on this layout haven't come out exactly the way that I guessed they might have when I did the track planning. So make some paper cutouts or do something to scale, whatever it takes to assure yourself that you're not going to have any surprises when you get into operation. And finally, I'll leave you with the view of a locomotive actually making that runaround maneuver here in the log camp. So coming around those 3 cars that were left on the inbound track. Well, that's about it for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.